to crowdsource.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, finish that thought, Greg. No.
Yeah, I thought, the only way to really do this properly would be to find some way to crowdsource this and take advantage of consensus with the crowd rather than just consensus with me. And that was just impossible back in the 2000s. It was impossible actually until just like a couple of years ago, really. And then it was, a couple of years ago, LLM technology uh, with ChatGPT came around. I went, wow, I think this is an opportunity,
Yep, yep.
to finally crowdsource and use proper objective analysis. Then that was the other issue too. I'll talk about that a little bit as well, but
Well,
that's an issue that we all face with
let me
ARVs.
just give a little background, um, because Greg has been so up there with the precognition going back, and I think most of you remember this because it really made a big splash because he made over $100,000. And this was the one which goes back to 1998 to 2011. He did a 13-year ARV study, kind of remarkable actually. He had 5,677 trials, and I'm really trying to remind you of this. Some of you may forgot it, but he, going way back there, made his 52.65% correct predictions. But what he was really doing was what he called project questions, where he would get a consensus. And there he got over 60%. So they were answered correctly with a Z of 3.49. But what he did, of these 60% of the trades were profitable, amounting to $146,000, and that made the press big time. But in this one, he did it all himself. What he's about to talk about uh, is one where he got people from all over the country to participate in this new one of his time machine experiments. Okay, so I just wanted to give that background. He is probably brought more people in than anybody else because of his just just straightforward way of doing and reporting results. So with that, Deborah, I'll leave it to you to go on to your normal.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marty. So just want to say hello to everyone who's come today to hear Greg talk and also to ask him questions and dialogue with him. That's really what these meetings are all about. And for any new people, these Talk With series really are the brainchild of Marty Rosenblatt here. Probably most of you are familiar with Marty, but Marty is definitely a legend of his own in this field of precognition, associative remote viewing, running the Applied Precognition Project. And most recently, the Applied Precognition Project, or APP, became basically a division of IRVA, the International Remote Viewing Association, and that's something that we're still in the process of that transition. We're having a lot of help by Teresa Fendley here and the other APP managers, Julia, Crystal. So having a lot of help here with that. We're still in a transition period. IRVA is converting over to a whole new web platform, and we're going to be bringing APP content and Irva's content over and combining things. But we wanted to get started with this series or continue Marty's Talk With series as soon as possible to demonstrate that APP and all of its activities and groups and everything is active, is ongoing. You know, we're going to keep it going, even though Marty may be stepping back on some of his participation, but he's obviously here with us and we hope long into the future. So we'll get started now and then when after at the end of the presentation, we could talk a little bit more about some events we have coming up. And for anyone that's inspired by Greg's talk today, there are going to be opportunities for people to manage and run groups of their own. And we'll talk about upcoming meeting we have to help people who would like to do that. And so I just want to say a few more words about Greg and just a short introduction. Marty already gave a great one about just how significant his 13-year project has been. You know, a lot of times when people are talking about how you can use precognition and specifically associative remote viewing to predict future outcomes, whether of stocks or sports or things like that. A lot of times people refer back to the early work of Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, where they were able to make some money. I forget the exact amounts, but you know, like close to 100,000 or so, maybe 130, I think was Hal Puthoff's original project. And people still today often quote those projects. But if you're looking at modern day projects that have been successful that people in the field want to point to, they really will go to Greg's projects because there's been other shorter term projects, but nothing that was really this substantial. And it'll be interesting to hear from Greg because he combines intuition along with some logic. And it'll be interesting to hear how those two processes play out, where at least the 13-year project sounded like it wasn't just purely intuitive processes. So I know people have an interest in that as well. Greg has been featured in multiple publications: Popular Science Magazine, Men's Journal, Wired Magazine, National Geographic, Explore Magazine, and dozens of national and local newspapers, TV, and radio shows. He's a successful athlete, inventor, entrepreneur, millionaire, and world record holder. His amazing tale of success has been built on ambitious goals, determined actions, hard work, and foresight. His long list of feats compelled the Discovery Channel to call him a real life superhero. And he has designed and fabricated one of the fastest bicycles in the world, the Critical Power, and he broke the record distance for distance traveled over 24 hours by human power alone. And so much more could be said, but we'll let him share if there's anything else he would like to talk about. But I will just say it sounds like he's taken his athletic discipline and effort and now put it into precognition. So, Greg, why don't you take it away? And if you would like to, we can have Marty, if you want to stop your screen share, and then Greg can start his if he would like, or whenever you're ready for that. Also, a reminder, everyone, if you want to just see Greg's video, you can go and pin him up there. Everyone on Zoom has control. And I think if you look for the view icon in the upper right hand corner, then it'll let you decide if you want to just see the speaker or everybody else here.
Okay, let me see if I can, if I have to. Greg, I think you might be able to just share
I did.
and override me.
I did. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, so your screen is up there.
Excuse me. Okay, good. Thank you very much, Deborah. You made me blush with that intro. Um, I want to just start and hello to everybody. And thank you for any of you who were early participants in this experiment. I know John was a participant for a little while there, and I really appreciate that back in the early days of this. I want to just start by quickly reviewing what I tried to accomplish with the big 13-year experiment that I started back in 1998. And what kind of resulted from that and why I stopped doing it after that and didn't resume again until early 2023. So when we were talking earlier, Marty, you reminded me of a story that I was going to tell you. And I thought I'll just save it for the group because it's kind of interesting. I just remember back in the early 90s reading about SRI and all of the Stargate program and all of that research. And I was a trader back then, trading the markets. And I kind of wondered if there was a way you could take remote viewing and make it more objective, put it into a tighter protocol, and somehow associate or relate the outcome of some financial market to your remote viewing. And of course, I was familiar with all the problems. You can't directly go and remote view, the outcome of the Dow Jones Industrial Average or the S&P 500 because your conscious mind knows what it's doing and your brain gets, mixed up, right? And so I was wondering, and I thought of this way, and I remember I was reading Joe McMonagle's book, and I remember finding his email and sending him an email and saying, Joe, I came up with this really great idea. It's how you can take remote viewing and actually associate, two targets with two events. And I described the whole thing in this big long email. And he actually wrote me back and he said, "Oh, well, yeah, that's already been invented. It's called associative remote viewing." And Russ Targ, and he gave me the whole story. And I was like, "Oh, okay, I got it." So that was kind of my start to the whole thing is reading that early. And I was a programmer as well, and so I wrote my own program to manage the targets and the ARV. One of the things that I noticed having problems with in the early days was that, and this was before the first paper, was that, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced the same thing, is that when you get a weak session, you feel like you really want to do something with that information when you know you really shouldn't, that there's uh, not enough consensus or not enough confidence in the session. But you kind of feel like, oh, I wasted all that time and energy into doing this ARV session. I don't want to waste it. And so I started experimenting a little bit with using consensus by doing multiple ARV trials, all of them different, two different targets, one transcript, multiple, and then actually taking a consensus of all of the predictions. And I found that I could increase my hit rate by doing this consensus. And that actually solved another pretty big problem that I was having. And I'm sure that you've all had this issue too. You get two random targets that are too similar, and you don't know which one to go with. Or you get a target that just happens to have an ice cream cone in it, and you've got an ice cream cone in your transcript, and it just by chance you're going to match it and you're going to get a really high score. Uh, that's a problem with the targets. And so I found that by using consensus and many, many, many trials, all using different targets, you would kind of even out that risk of getting bad targets or a high scoring session for just a lucky target. And I found it did actually work. So I set up a protocol and I wrote this application to manage the whole thing. And I kind of started doing it and keeping track of all my results. And then this went on for, as you know, for 13 years. And I decided when I finished, I showed it to Paul Smith, and because he was kind of following me through this whole thing. And he was the one who actually recommended that I publish this paper. And he helped me put the paper together and publish it, which I'm really, really thankful for. He's been so helpful there. But so I think what I was able to demonstrate with the original experiment was that consensus does actually work. At least it does work with one viewer, and that was me. If you do a number of trials, and there were some trades or projects, questions that had 300 trials in it. And that would take me sometimes 2 or 3 weeks to do. And that didn't seem to matter. It was the more trials that I did, the higher consensus, the better the results were. And that was all great. I think that I showed that that was probably the case, that you can use consensus. It does actually work. What I didn't know was I didn't know if consensus would work among different viewers for the same question. I had no idea if that would work. The other thing that I didn't know is I wasn't sure. Well, yeah, I wasn't sure about the multiple viewers, but the other problem that I had was it was so time consuming. I could spend up to, like I said, 3 weeks doing hundreds and hundreds of trials, coming up with a consensus for one single trade that, might have made or lost $10. It was a lot of work. And so when I was finished, I was done. I was like, no, this is just really not worth continuing on with. It's just too much work, frankly. And I thought the only way this is going to work is if there's some way to automate the analysis, because that was the part that was taking up most of the time, was the analysis. And so I dropped it, and I didn't actually think about it again until early 2023, when I was aware of ChatGPT and large language models, and I thought, gee, these models are getting to the point now where they could do a lot of the analysis. And I thought, now might not be a bad time to pick this project up again and see if we can do a really big crowdsourcing experiment using the LLMs to do the analysis. So I started with a sort of a prototype application. John Knowles, you were involved as one of the participants in that early phase. And I apologize now for the quality of the application. It crashed all the time. I know it was horrible, but at least it showed me that it could be done. We got the LLM to work. We got the app to work. We figured out, how this was going to, and this took, quite a while, probably 6 months in early 2023, before I decided, okay, we can actually move one step further. We decided to start hiring more people. I'm just going to change my screen is changed. Yeah, okay, we're okay there. Yeah, so I thought we could hire more participants, and so we started hiring more, and I started testing out the idea that we can use consensus from lots of different people for the same question, and that seemed to work. We were getting positive results by doing that. So one step at a time. We rewrote the app. I hired a programmer. We got an app that worked pretty good and pretty fast. And then we started experimenting with how to actually do the trades. So the original idea was actually that we would try to get hundreds of ARV trials in a day, and then split those up into 10 sets of 10, for example, and use the consensus for each one of the group of 10 to trade a different market, so that I could benefit from the diversification in one day by trading a number of different markets. So we started out with a few markets, and we started kind of leveraging up to 100 to 200 trials per day. And that was not really working very well, because I felt that the general quality of the remote viewing transcripts that were coming in wasn't as high as what I was used to contributing, and I felt that we needed a higher consensus. And so we thought it would be a better idea to just focus on one single question a day, one trade, and use all of the trials to predict the outcome of that one trade. And that's when we started having pretty good success. So we continue to kind of ramp that up in a mostly informal way, changing the app, working through how do we find these participants. Because I had figured out that, if we were to trade 1 hour period at the start of the day of the NASDAQ index, I knew what the average profit during that 1 hour period was. I knew what our costs were. I knew if we could get up to mid 50% hit rate, then I knew what we could afford. I knew what our costs were too, and I knew what we could afford to pay our participants, because I knew that was something that was really important, that we had to actually provide them with a reward or some incentive to do this. And so we experimented with different work platforms. We finally settled on Upwork, which worked very, very well for us. They were very expensive because Upwork took money. We were paying our participants $5 per 10 predictions, and every prediction had 10 trials in it. So there was 100 trials. We were paying them $5. It doesn't sound like a lot of money, but we were hiring a lot of these participants from Africa and from Eastern Europe and some countries in Asia, like the Philippines. And to them, that was actually a lot of money. And so they really appreciated this job. So in sort of early 2024, we were still working out the bugs, working on the application, working on a method to hire, to onboard these people, to train them, and then also working on building up the number of hires that we were hiring. And the more we hired, the more work there was, the more administration, paying. It was just a really, really big job. So I had to hire somebody for that as well. We finally got to the point where I was pretty happy with the overall structure of the program. And then I thought, okay, we're going to start an actual official experiment on March 1st. And we're going to run this for 6 months, and we're going to run it, and we're going to do it exactly this way. This is exactly how we're going to analyze all the trials. This is where we're going to hire from. And that was kind of the start of that March to August period. That was what we said right from the start. This was going to be for 6 months. If it works after 6 months, we'll make the decision as to whether or not we're going to continue or whatnot. So we did. We started it, and we basically ran it that way for the most part for 6 months. We had initial success right off the bat. At the start of the 6 month period, here's a good chart here that shows that success. We ramped up really high to about May, as you do when you start something new for some reason. I'm sure you've all experienced this before too. You get this initial spurt of success, and then things kind of tend to kind of slow down after that. But what I'm going to do now is just quickly take you through some of the statistics and results, and then I'll open it up to questions. I'm sure that I didn't. I'm sure you got lots of things that you got on your mind that I didn't address here. So the most important statistic, I think, is this chart right here. So what this chart shows is it shows very, very simply the black line. The x-axis here is the number of trials. So we're starting at 0 trials, and we're going through time all the way up to 800,000 trials, which is where we ended at. The black line is simply the difference in score that the AI gave the score between the correct target and the wrong target. So one trial might have an ice cream cone and a hamburger, and if the transcript was ice cream cone, then the LLM would probably score the photo of the ice cream cone very high. Scores were, I think, from zero to 0.5 were the scores. It's called a cosine score. It's just a raw cosine score. It just is a measure of how close the user came to describing each photo. And so we used the LLM to analyze each photo. So the photo of the hamburger would have gotten a 0.1. The photo of the ice cream cone probably would have got a 0.3 or a 0.4. So the score for that entire trial was if it was 0.4 and 0.2, that would have been, the score would have been 0.2 for the hamburger, the difference between the two. And if the trial was right, then that got a positive 0.2. If the trial was wrong, if the actual outcome was the hamburger, then that would have got a minus 0.2. Okay, so that's all the black line is, just really, really simple. It's just accumulating scores as time goes on, difference between the correct photo and the wrong photo. All right. Now, what we do to convert that into a statistic is we run 100 random simulations, Monte Carlo simulations. So we actually ran our LLM for about 5 weeks straight, running these 100 simulations. It was a big, big job. And what they are is basically every single one of these light gray lines here is two completely random targets pulled from the database of photos. And we take the actual transcript and we compare it to two random pictures. We take the highest, scoring one, and we subtract the lowest scoring one. If the trial was right, we give it a plus. If it was wrong, we give it a minus. So these gray lines here represent what you would expect to happen if all of this was just chance. And that's what the skeptics would say, is they would say, well, that's great. You've got this black line, but really the photos are just random and the transcripts are random. And, you're just lucky if you get it right or you get it wrong. But over time, this black line was the highest performing of all of the controls, 2 out of 98 times. So that is statistically significant. So that's a really important statistic, I think, because it's simple, it's easy to understand, and I don't think anybody can argue with that. It's just so simple. I can, demonstrate it very easily. And we've got another way of looking at this, which is looking at the z-scores for every trial. And so what was happening behind the scenes with our LLM is the LLM would compare the transcript, the participant's transcript, with the two target photos. And then what it would do is it would go and grab 100 random photos from our database, and it would compare that transcript to all of those. And what it would do, it would come up with a mean and a standard deviation of the scores for the 100 controls. And then it would compare the score that it got for the correct photo and for the wrong photo, or I should say photo A and photo B in this case, because we don't really know what the outcome yet is of the event. And it would convert the score for photo A and photo B to a z-score, which is statistical. The reason we had to do that was because a lot of times a viewer could say tree in the transcript. And sure enough, there's a tree in one of the two pictures. Okay, the LLM is going to score that really high because they did write tree, and there was a tree in the picture. But that isn't really statistically significant because, as you know, there's trees in probably half the pictures out there. There's going to be a tree in the picture. So it doesn't really tell us anything. Using the 100 controls and comparing that transcript that says tree to all 100, it's going to find 50 random pictures with trees in it. And so we're going to get a really low z-score. And yes, they still got tree, but it's not that significant. And so the weighting of it is not going to be very high. That worked really, really well for us. And so if we take a look at, we add up the z-scores for all of for all the photos that were correct, that's the green line here. And we add up the z-score for all the photos that were wrong, that's the red line here. If the photos were just random and the transcripts were just random, then both of those lines would be about the same. We have a clear higher score. This is a Stouffer z-score. So the ending resulting statistic is significant. It's at 1 point, almost 1.8, so barely significant, not hugely significant, but barely significant. But there's a big difference between the red line and the blue line, or sorry, the green line and the red line, which is kind of what we want to see. I'm going to actually open the floor up now for questions before we get into the trades, because I'm afraid that I may have glossed over something in my kind of long-winded explanation that I'll give you a chance to kind of get me to explain it better. Is that okay, Deborah?
Yeah, that's a great idea. If anyone has a question, feel free to just like turn on your video camera and unmute yourself and you could directly ask it. Or if you want to raise your hand, like I see Damon has his hand up, so we'll call on him first. So you can put your hand up and I'll call on you, or you can just, well, why don't we do that? You can raise your virtual hand and Damon, feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. That's a really super interesting presentation. I think I'm partially very favorable to it because I had an IRVA grant to kind of build out something very similar. So I've been thinking along these very, very same lines. My question is, with respect to the transcripts themselves, is this some kind of, are they primarily like sketches with some keywords, or are they more verbal? And what was the transformation process you went through with the LLM? Like, did you use like a multimodal model to like describe the transcript and then embed that as like a vector embedding to get the cosine similarity? That's kind of, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense or if that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm sorry, I didn't explain that before. The transcripts were all text. So, and the apps that the participants used, they had a text field that they typed in, and we didn't direct them. We didn't advise them as to how to write. Some wrote very, very elaborate descriptions visually, or just describing what they visually saw. Some were very matter-of-factly. Some were one or two words. They were just all over the board. So, and we found that worked pretty well, actually, with the LLM that we ended up using. You could actually take your, I see a triangle up here and I see a circle over here, and you could describe that in text and it would work pretty good. I think you could do a lot better now by using some of these multimodal LLMs and taking advantage of the visual component, but that would have been a lot of work. And that was a little bit before its time back in when we started this in mid 2024.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
If I could just ask a quick follow-up, I had to step out, so maybe I missed this part of your presentation, but you had talked about the target pairs themselves. What strategy did you employ to kind of ensure some level of orthogonality with the targets, like so they weren't very similar, or were they just random?
They were completely 100% random. Yeah,
Okay.
I felt that we had, at our peak, we were processing 500 trials, 5,000 trials a day. So from 500 viewers, each were doing 10 trials. That is a ton of images. And I just felt that any kind of similarities would just even out in the wash type of thing. So I didn't bother with having to do that work, but it probably would have improved things, I think. If I was going to make a list of suggestions for the next experiment, that's one that I would say, because you could use the LLMs now to automatically, pick out two dissimilar targets beforehand in your set. So I would definitely do that now.
Yeah, if you're interested in talking about that offline, we just came out with the Omni data set, which is designed for this very specific purpose. So you can dissociate on psychological care variables or visual or semantic categories as well.
That would have been really good, I think. Yeah.
Okay, next, Bill has a question, and then after him, we'll go to JT. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you. My question has to do with how you associate the targets. You know, at what time do you do the association? The reason I'm asking is because in some of the early groups in the past 25 years, some of the early groups would associate the target photos with a side before anything was done towards making a relationship, or, you know, a person doing a session. Um, Later times, some of the groups have been doing that association of the targets only after the session is done. And it makes a difference because in one case, you've got something to do with time because you have to see where they're associated. In the other case, in the earlier case, it's a matter of some systematic association that's already there.
Yeah.
So it's not really time; it's what you know, what the person is doing is looking to see which one completes. You know, so um, I, I've forgotten the word for it. Anyway, it makes a difference, and I'd like to know which way do you do this? Is the association done only after the session, or is the association done before the session?
Yeah, the association in our case was done every single time before the session. So the way that the app worked is when the participant started their question, we called it, they would start a new trial, and as soon as they pushed trial, at that point, we would go out to the random number generator. We would pick two random images from the database. They would get queued up for target A and target B. And then we would use the random number generator again to randomize the two associations. The associations that we were using, the two potential answers to the question was yes or no. The question always was, will the market increase in price between this time and this time tomorrow morning? And if it was no, it was either even or went down. And if it was yes, it was up. So we would use the random number generator to randomize the associations for the two targets. And so that was all locked in. Of course, nobody could see that, right? It was just in the database.
Right.
Before the user actually started the mentation process and started typing their transcript.
So the side that was for yes was already there before the session was done.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's the correct way. Thank you.
Okay, and then JT.
Hey, Greg, it's Joe. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. My question regards the training of the remote viewer set that you were able to grab. I know you said you grabbed a large group from all over the world. Were you tracking any of the training metrics as far as how the remote viewers were specifically trained as it relates to their performance? And did you notice, if so, did you notice any increase in performance, like those black line high value performers in association with the kind of training they received?
Good question. We did not recruit our participants from the remote viewing community or any of that. It's anybody who wanted to do it could do it. So chances are there were very, very few. I don't think there was any except in the early days when we were, prototyping still. I don't think there were any actual trained remote viewers or anybody with any experience at this at all. So the amount of training that we gave them was a small little videotape, a small little YouTube series that I made, just describing how I do it myself, which is just, close my eyes and try to think of nothing and wait for something to come into my head. That was all the training that they got. to answer the second part of your question, since nobody was trained, we couldn't make any kind of a relationship between the kind of training and how they performed. But actually, what we did do is we took a look at performance, and we asked the question, and this is something I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, if you had a high performer, a high performing individual, would they continue to perform high, or would they not continue to perform high? So this sort of demonstrates skill. Is there such a thing? Is there actually such a thing as skill? If you're skilled, you'd be good at doing it at the beginning, and you'd be good at also doing it at the end, right? So what we did is we took everybody's trials and we split them into two sections, the trials that they did at the start and the trials that they did at the end. And what we did is we said, well, if they were, we ranked the first half of their trials. And if they performed at the top for the first half, we would expect them to also perform at the top of the second half. And for the most part, if you perform near the top of your first half of your trials, you will perform near the bottom of your second half of the trials. And if you perform near the bottom of the first half of the trials, you would perform near the top at your second half of the trials. The only time where that wasn't true was the very, very, very highest top performers. They went on to also perform very, very high on the second half. And also the worst performers, the very, very worst, went on to also perform very, very bad during their second half. But those numbers were so small, they were not statistically reliable. So I didn't publish them, but it's kind of interesting that for the most part, we find that people who seem to be pretty good at doing this end up reverting to the mean and not continuing on doing well. That was a real surprising finding, but that's for the most part, that's what it is.
So, how many trials did each person complete?
The minimum was 100 trials. So they had 10 predictions that they had to do, one a day, and each prediction was 10 trials. So they had to do a minimum of 100. We did rehire a lot of people. So we had anywhere from individuals, I think we had something like 4,000, 4 or 5,000 people going through this, anywhere from 100 to 1,000 trials. Yeah, we had some people doing thousands of trials.
So I believe that you're finding it sounds like the people that were doing well eventually didn't do so well. That does seem to be very consistent with what other parapsychology projects have found. And you stated it might mean that they don't have as much natural talent, but it may just be because they're burned out and
Yeah.
from to because that's a lot of trials. How much time did they have with you? How many months did the whole thing take?
Well, it was 6 months, and then we did a 2 month follow-up experiment after that. So it's 8 months. And they weren't all with us for 8 months. We tended to try to hire beginners. And so that's something else that I think was kind of important that we found was that the green line here is beginners, the first timers. This is their first 100 trials or the first number of trials. And the red line is people who have been doing it for a while. So that's the second half of their trials. And the score for the first half is way higher. It's like extremely significant. 2.32 Z-score for the first half compared to chance, below chance for the second half, for the red line.
So would you say that demonstrates learning by the newer people? Because it looks like the green line, it's showing that they started to do better over time. Did is that
Uh,
right?
no, this is the Z-score for all first timers. That's green. So that's people who only did their first 10 predictions, and their Z-score was 2.3. And then we take all the people that did more than 10 predictions. So from number 10 all the way to however many they did, we find their z-score is down at 0.9 or something like that.
Okay. Thank you. Lyle next, and then Damon.
Yes, thank you. Did the people, the participants know? Did you give them feedback on yes, they did well or they did not do well, or was it just the same? You never told them.
We did. We started out showing them right away what their score was for each target without showing them what the association was, just that they got a score of 0.4 on one and minus 0.2 on the other. And then as soon as the trade was over the next day and they got to see their feedback, we would show them whether they got it correct or not correct. What we found was we found that we were losing a lot of participants prior to the end of their contract, which is 10 predictions, because they'd start seeing a few that were wrong, that they got wrong, and they get discouraged and they would quit. And so we stopped actually doing that, and we started not showing them any results until after all of their 10 predictions, their contract was done. And that's how we did most of the experiment. So we didn't show them feedback immediately. We showed them feedback immediately. They got to always see the photos. So they got to see how close they came to one of the photos, which was the correct one, of course. But they didn't get to see if they actually got it right or not until the end of their week or 2 week work contract.
Damon?
Actually, it was a related question, and I want to make sure I understand this. So you would show them the photo to which they had the higher score, or you'd show them both?
No, we'd show them the photo that was the correct photo.
Okay, but then you wouldn't know the correct photo until
After
after
the event.
the event. So what was the kind of time interval there?
Well, so they would they would log into the program. There's always an event every single weekday from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. That's when the event actually happens. So if they logged into the app at any time after 8 o'clock, they'd be automatically scheduled for tomorrow's trade. So they would do their trials, they would do their transcripts, they submit them, the LLM would do its analysis, and they would come back tomorrow at 8 o'clock after the event was finished to look at their feedback. And at the feedback time, they would get to see 10 images that were associated with the correct outcome of the event and match them up to the transcripts. And that was basically all the information that they got until they were finished all 10. Then they got to see what their win rate was. And they were paid also bonuses based on their hit rate.
Let's see. Yeah, that's interesting. So I think like this decline effect is, as Deborah had mentioned, is kind of canonical across different studies, even in completely different paradigms.
Yep.
And I wonder if it tracks a little bit to like a meaningfulness vector where, you know, in the early trials, when you have some degree of success, it's has a certain degree of like profoundness to it. But then it starts to become old hat after a while and
Yep.
doesn't quite have the same saliency in the later trials, and you see this decline. But it is interesting that you see this in random number generator studies. You see this in, you know, various PK studies. I mean, it's Gansfeld, et cetera. It's quite remarkable how robust the decline effect actually is in itself.
Oh yeah, and when we found that for sure, and that's why we finished the project, we were only hiring first timers for that reason, because of this statistic right here on this page, the green line and the red line. So it definitely, whether that's caused by fatigue, whether it's caused by something else, exhausting some battery of a skill, of ability or something. I don't know, some psi battery or something. I don't really know what the reason is, but we definitely found that. And yeah, when we stopped hiring, we stopped rehiring people and started just focusing on hiring new people all the time. which was a job in and of itself. Hiring 500 people a day that are all new is a tough job.
That is an interesting finding in and of itself, though, probably worth its own report because there's kind of an open question with this notable decline effect. Is this at the participant level or is it at kind of the experiment level? And if it's at the experiment level, you would expect to see like kind of like early successes in the experiment with like a precipitous decline overall that maybe like regresses towards like chance level towards the end of the experiment. So it's like the effect is washed out versus it sounds like what you're finding is it seems to be more at the participant level where, you know, by virtue of capitalizing these early first timers that you actually see this effect that there's some divergence between first timers and like multiple trial participants. That would kind of suggest that it is more of a participant level factor than an experiment level factor.
Honestly, I think it's both because I think, and when we look at on the experiment level, you're really talking a lot about what's called the experimenter effect. And that is like who's actually doing it, me, or is it all the participants? We don't really know for sure. But we can see this chart here shows, really good success until, about halfway. And then we sort of just evened out and even kind of went down a little bit after that. So and that definitely shows experimenter effect, not the users, because we were hiring a lot of first timers in this second half of the program here. So there definitely is both going on here. And I don't think, and I've had lots of conversations with others like James Spottiswoode about this, it's really difficult to separate the experimenter effect from what you're really trying to measure in an experiment. It's a real tough one. And I think we see some experimenter effect in here. Yeah.
Did you start to feel tired or bored or
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I had a programmer, we had technical issues. His wife was managing all of the hiring through Upwork, and there was a period of time, just to give you an example of, some of the things that we were going through. There was a period of time where we were trying to get away from Upwork and we were trying to go source the participants direct. And we found a really good source in Nigeria. And it turned out once we started getting into fraud detection, which we incorporated into the program about halfway through. And that is basically one of the things that we were doing was we were looking through the transcripts. Our computer program the server was looking through the transcripts, trying to find duplicated strings between two transcripts, which would indicate that you have one person with two accounts. And we found hundreds of people doing this, hundreds of them doing this. So we had to deal with that and guarding against that. And yeah, it was a lot of work and it was a lot of stress too, more than you'd think, really. But and that was one of the reasons why we just didn't see a point in continuing on with it. It was a lot of work and a lot of stress.
And what was your rationale for not even initially hiring experienced viewers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What my intention with this project experiment really was to see is if consensus in a really, really big way actually does work. If we could get consensus from 1,000 trials for one prediction, would that be would 2,000 trials be better than 1,000? Would 3,000 be better? Would 4? Would 5 be better? Generally, yes, we found that was the case. Could you go all the way to get 100%? I don't think so, because that curve flattens out really quickly. You get up to 2,000 and you get a pretty nice significant increase. 3, good. 4 slows down. 5 almost flattens out, and all the rest of your work is just sort of wasted. You get just minor increases in hit rate. In order to get those numbers up, we couldn't go to the community, number one. And number two, most of that community is in the Western world, Western Europe, or in North America. And you can't motivate people with $5 for 2 weeks worth of work. So that just wasn't going to work. We had to kind of go with anybody who was interested, somebody who showed interest in and was intrigued in this. That was kind of who we were looking for.
And I just have one more question. And anyone who wants to ask a question, please raise your hand or indicate it. Did any of those people give you feedback about the difference this project made? Because it sounds like you brought awareness to a lot more people who may not have been aware of remote viewing or any of this. And did you do any surveys or polling about the impact this project had on them?
That's a really, really good question, Deborah. And yeah, we were, I mean, I'm not going to say inundated, but I mean, so many comments about how amazed people were, just floored by this, and how excited they were that they discovered this ability in themselves that they never knew that they had. And that was what one of my goals with the project was, that's what we actually put right on our web page was, and I'll show you what our web page looked like. Do you believe in the power of your thoughts? One of our goals was to show that, to try to spread the news to as many people around the world as we could, that kind of thing. And yeah, we get a lot of comments. We didn't do any follow-up questionnaires, but we got thousands of positive comments. So that was really neat.
Yeah, that's really amazing. All right, any other questions before Greg continues? It sounded like, Greg, you have more you would like to share.
I can just go over the trades. That's sort of the last part of the statistics that I think you would be interested in.
Yeah, go ahead and do that,
Okay.
and open it up for questions again.
Excuse me. Okay, so this first chart here, this is a chart of the actual trades themselves, so the events. So overall, there's in this period from March to September, I think there was somewhere around 600,000 trials. And the number of trials per trade varied anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 trials. And so this is a plot of the profit and loss per trade. And so we see a theoretical profit and loss of a theoretical profit of $265,600. And that would be if we had taken every single trade on every single day and we traded strictly 5 contracts. In reality, we started out trading less than 5 contracts, and then we started to increase the contracts. So in reality, the actual profits were something like 200 and I forget, 240 or something like that. They're a little bit different from the theoretical, but this is what they would be if we had followed the rules perfectly and never had any technical mishaps or anything like that. Okay, yeah, sorry. Actual profit was 241,000. So what we can do with this is we can run 100 Monte Carlo simulations to see what the odds against chance, and that works out to be about 1 in 100. So in other words, if you were randomly making a trading decision every single day, which is every single blue dot here, it would take you 100 random series of all these trades to amount to a profit that was as high as or higher than 265,000. So that's how we do the statistics. It's called a Monte Carlo simulation of how that works. So what's kind of interesting is if we, and this is a little confusing. And I'll let you ask questions after I explain this to you because I always get questions after I explain this. If we filter out any trial with a z-score of 2.5 or higher, so those are the highest 3% scoring trials in all of the trials. If we remove them out of the data, our success rate goes way up. We get a trade z-score of 2.3 versus 1.85, and we get a hit rate of 60.5% versus 58.1%. And that's what the chart looks like there. So it's quite a bit of a difference in the smoothness of the equity curve by removing the highest scoring trials. So we just take them out completely. So did I explain that? Do you have any questions about that? This is a little bit confusing.
Anyone?
That makes sense. I'm just curious. I mean, you could do this proactively, right? Because you
Yep.
have the
Yep.
yeah.
But why it would be the highest and not the lowest, I don't know. But the very highest, so the highest confidence, and these are exact matches. So these are trials where the user named the target. Absolutely. That score is the best of the best of the best. The top 3%. Top 3% they're mind-blowing. I mean, they're like incredible. We've got a whole showcase set up at the website if you want to look through some of them. There's some of them are like, I see two hearts, one's gold and one's blue, and that's exactly what it is. Those ones are more likely to be wrong than they are to be right.
Right. So, but in that case, so you could actually proactively threshold your trade decisions based on
Yeah.
some z-score if you'd like.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Because it's all known beforehand. Yes.
Okay, it looks like Jeff has a question. Oh, you're on mute. Jeff, you're on mute.
Still mute.
No, I think I'm
There
okay
you go.
now.
You're good now. Hi, Jeff.
Hello. It sounds like you're suggesting that when the viewer is highly accurate, they're displacing to the wrong target.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Which is, I presume, a post hoc finding.
It is. Yeah.
Oh, so did I misunderstand that you didn't filter by the wait to make sure I said so this is actually you have better performance if you remove the highest z-score trials as opposed to only
Yes.
focus on z-score? Oh wow. So I had that
Yes.
reversed.
This is a post hoc finding. We didn't do this, but knowing this, we could go forward on the next experiment, and you could build that into the analysis, and you could just automatically toss out all these high scores. But that's actually
Yeah,
what happened.
I wonder if this is even a stronger case to be made for having orthogonal target sets so that you don't get such strong, if you just have like in your pool, you have, a volcano versus a pebble on the sidewalk, you get a really strong hit on the volcano, even though it's the non-target because it's just the more dynamic and interesting image. So it'd be kind of interesting to do a post hoc analysis to see if there was some qualitative variable that explains the displacement.
Yeah. Yeah. It's worth looking into more. I agree.
Or it could be a rebellion of the viewer's subconscious if they really were getting burnt out.
Could
I
be.
suspected that. Um, yeah, Teresa.
I'm just out of curiosity. I mean, it's odd that you chose to pick the top 3%. Did you also look at the lowest 3%?
Well, yeah, I mean, the analysis probably started looking at the lowest, how could we increase the score ad hoc? Excuse me. How could we increase the score ad hoc? But we found that removing the lowest scores didn't really do anything at all. Didn't change the result, but removing the highest scores had the only effect, and it was a pretty big effect.
Okay, so when you were giving the feedback to the viewers and showing those really high matches, that was not saying that they had the really high match. Well, it was the winning target, though, right?
No, this would be any score. So no, this is any score, the absolute z-score that's higher than 2.5. So we didn't look at whether it was correct or not correct. We just removed if it was high. So in most cases, they'd be looking at a photo that did not resemble what the transcript was for these really super high scores. That's what that means.
Well, that kind of explains something because I know that some of the hits that I was a participant in, some of the hits that I got I couldn't really see why, they were hits when I was looking.
Well, they wouldn't have been hits, they would have been high scores. So the high score would have been because the other one or high BAS score is because the other photo was the one that was the correct photo or sorry, the photo that you're looking at was the correct, but the other one was the one you described, probably in that case.
Were viewers getting their scores before the event played out, or they weren't? Were they getting their scores at the time of feedback, or would they get scores about both?
Yeah, at the beginning they were getting both scores, but they weren't, of course, they didn't know which one was correct or which one was wrong. And then we stopped doing that when we delayed the feedback till the end of the project. We didn't show them the scores at all because we felt that just this emotion, we were trying to suppress the emotion in the process. If you get too excited because you got a really high score, maybe that would adversely affect your results. Or if you were discouraged, you might not want to continue anymore. So we really tried to reduce that by giving them less information.
Because in a way that's could be false feedback, is giving them
Yeah,
this high score to something that doesn't turn out to be the.
exactly. And so what you find maybe is that some participants are just trying to get a high score. And that's not what we want them to do. That's not the objective. The objective is to describe the photo you're going to see tomorrow. And you can't really give them any other objective, or they're going to maybe want to do that. If they see a little success there, they're going to focus in on that. And that's what they're going to end up doing. And you don't want that, right? So we stopped doing that. I'm not sure if this effect would disappear, this is overall, so I don't really know if this is more pronounced for the people who saw the scores or not. I'm not sure.
Okay. Jeff, did you have another question? Or anybody? Oh, John.
Hi, Greg. John Knowles here.
Hey, John.
Thanks so much for doing this. This is incredible. I guess one point I made when I tried early on these trials, they were all verbal. And since I get a lot of drawings, I was saying, whoa, I'm not using half of my capability here. I'm just wondering if AI can analyze the photos and the sessions on the past work you've done, or if you don't have enough data to be able to have the AI analyze that. I know you said going forward, the AI can analyze drawings, and that's definitely happening. I guess I'm a little confused on what I'm saying here, but
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, maybe you got what my drift was.
Yeah, I do, and I think now, back when we started this, that wasn't possible. It would have been too slow. We found an LLM that just all it did was cosines for text description, transcripts, and photos. It would just give you back a similarity cosine score. Now it would be possible. I think you'd still be dealing with the cost of doing that, 5,000 trials a day, every single day, and then plus 100 controls. That's a ton of LLM work and time on that NVIDIA chip that you got to pay for. So that would be the issue now is bandwidth and CPU time, or GPU time, actually.
Yeah. The other point I was trying to make is that this is a very unusual result. It's 3% of the highest scoring Z-scores. I've never seen anything like it, and it's boggling my mind. But I wonder if it's an artifact of using language and not images. That's something for further testing, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. Could
Yeah.
be.
Thanks.
Damon?
Can you explain a little bit more about the cosine similarity for matching the participants' text to the photos? Were the photos captioned, or how did you do text to image comparison?
With the LLM. We use the LLM to do so we send in, excuse me, we have a large language model running on a server. It's open source. It's running on our own server. We submit the actual photo with a transcript, with a text transcript. The LLM compares the transcript to the photo and generates a cosine score, and that's the cosine score that we use.
Oh, that's strange. So when I think of cosine scores, I think of that as some product that comes out of embeddings, vector embeddings.
No,
Um,
no, this is not that. This is not. I know about that. This is not that at all. This is, you
I
could
mean, a
take
cosine is by definition, is some measure of discrete, like quantitative similarity between two, like, because it's not like, if you have vector embeddings, you're comparing apples to apples, they have to have the same structure, et cetera. But image to text does not have anywhere near, so there has to be some translation into a shared space between those. So I'm curious how the LLM is able to effectuate that.
I don't know, it's using the training, the training and the weights, and it knows what's in the picture. Like you've seen that. I'm sure you've seen it yourself looking at Gemini or ChatGPT. It knows it can describe a picture very, very well. It knows what's in there. So it can look at any picture that you give it, and it can compare the transcript, and it will. The LLM that we use that's all it does. It's built for just doing that. So it's not like submitting something in ChatGPT where you're waiting a minute to get back a score that who knows what the score is. It's different every single time. This is very, very specific. It gives you a score, and it will give you the same score almost every single photo if they're the same transcript. So it's very consistent, and it's built to just do that.
I see. Yeah, I wonder if there might be an opportunity to make it slightly more efficient than by pre-captioning the target pool. Again, happy to talk with you about this offline, but I'm sure that's what's happening with the model is it has to translate the description or the understanding of the image into a similar space as the understanding of the text so that it can make that cosine similarity comparison. So what we've done is that very process, which would be taking the text, embedding it in, and taking a caption, generating a caption about the image with the LLM, understanding the image, embedding that caption, and then doing a semantic similarity cosine score between those two blocks of text. And that's what produces a discrete value.
You're probably right. That's probably what it does. But I'm not sure. I mean, we've played around with it so much. It is so I mean, I can imagine if it were to write a transcript describing the photo beforehand, that transcript would be very, very detailed, because we can submit the slightest, even similar to something, and it'll pick that up right away. So if you describe something completely different, but there's some similarity between that and the image, like maybe what you're describing is more about sports and the image is about sports, although the sport's completely different, has nothing to do with each other, it'll find that and it'll actually score you for that. So I'm not
Yeah,
really
that's
sure
exactly
how it
right.
works.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. So, but by virtue of basically taking your image target set and generating captions that are, and you can control the parameters of those captions, like how robust do you want this description to be? Then you create a vector embedding for that. So now you're just maintaining a table of embeddings.
Hmm.
Then you have new text come in. You only have to embed that transcript text and do the comparison to your data set. And so you don't have to like show the image to the LLM every single time because
Right.
it's already seen it. That description's already basically exists.
That would probably work. Yeah, I see. So you're saying you do it once for all the images, and you don't have to do that transcript or that
Yeah.
analysis, I
So
guess,
half of the
again.
work is done. It's not done
Right,
ad hoc on the trial.
right,
Um,
right.
and what we've seen, and I've done this both with text and Julia Mossberg and I just had a paper out on this. What we've seen is that the text works well, but also it can, if you have now these multimodal models that can look at drawings and describe and interpret the drawings, then the real variable is the quality of the artistry, right? So
Yeah, right.
working with a visual artist, it works profoundly well, but working with like, you can't just take the squiggly lines and say, hell, I think that is a forest,
Yeah,
in the Andes or something.
yeah, for sure, for sure. But I know the model that we're using, I just remember this, you can submit an image with it, like a drawing with it, with your transcript. But what it does is it converts your drawing to a text description. So similar to what you're saying about converting the photograph, it also does the same with your drawing. So you could use it. We didn't really test that because it would take much, much longer to do the processing by doing that. So we didn't bother going that way, but you could do it. Be
Makes
interesting
sense.
to see.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I was wondering if you, in your prompt to the LLMs, you mentioned literal versus figurative words that it should take into account, or was it all strictly literal, or how did you handle that?
Um, when the participants entered their transcript and submitted it, we didn't provide them with any coaching or direction at all. And the transcripts were all over the map. I mean, we had some transcripts that were 1,000 words in length, and they were all just random words, probably copied out of a dictionary, honestly. Like,
Mm.
but we had a lot of those, people cheating and trying to get through, thinking that they found some trick in getting a correct trial by copying a million words and dumping it into the text block. So we had, that ranged all the way from there to one single word transcripts. So
But I'm wondering, didn't you give a prompt to the LLM on how it was supposed to analyze these words?
no, no.
Oh, so I'm at a loss then. How does that work? And
This LLM is specifically built to do only one thing, and that is to provide a cosine score which reflects the similarities between a photograph that you provided and a transcript. So you can't actually ask it anything else. It doesn't do that.
okay. Um, again, my mind's blown here, but okay, thank you.
What, John, what are you?
Well, when you say this LLM is only designed to do one thing, to provide a cosine,
Mhm.
I'm just a naive person in this, but I thought that most LLMs got prompts, and you give them detailed prompts to get detailed answers, using perplexity and stuff like that. You're clearly in a whole different advanced category here. So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, but there are versions of large language models that have been developed specifically for specific purposes,
Sure.
where they will do just one thing and one thing only. And that's what this one does. It's just specifically for image analysis.
But isn't there a built-in assumption that it's going to provide only literal interpretations of the words?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like all LLMs that you've played with or played around with, it does a pretty good job of understanding what you mean when you type. either literally or not, or figuratively. It kind of knows what you're getting at, and this also seems to be pretty good at doing that. If you were to provide a prefix to your prompt, it would probably want to compare the prompt to the image as well, because that's what it's been trained to do. That's all it does. So I don't know though. It'd be interesting to try that to see.
Okay, thanks for that additional info.
So I have a couple questions. First, how much did your um, awareness of trading and your logic enter into the predictions versus the data from the remote viewers?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So I had no control at all. Part of the protocol of the experiment was that all of the predictions and the actual trades were made strictly from the analysis of the trials only. And the process was automated, and I had of course I could override it, but it was nothing to do actually. The server would just decide what the prediction was going to be and would place the trade for us on our behalf. So yeah, that was
And
really.
and this was different from your 13-year study.
No, it wasn't. That's a kind of
Oh,
misunderstood. No, the first initial 13-year study was strictly what the ARV, and in many cases, I had no idea what the trade was. And in fact, I had a method to place those trades automatically without me seeing what they were, so that I didn't know what the outcome was until I didn't know what the trade was, the prediction was, until after the trade was over. And then I could see whether we went long or we went short or what the outcome was. So no, it was strictly no trading rules in there.
oh, I misunderstood that.
Yeah, no.
What do you think if you did combine the two together then?
I have looked at that and it doesn't seem to work at all.
Really?
Yeah. So I've taken um, some of our trading algorithms and I've applied those. I've applied them as using this as a filter, and you're using that as a filter, and the results are worse all the time. So it doesn't seem to work.
And my other question is, if you were going to repeat this, what would you do differently?
What I would do is I would continue to use only first timers, and more so even, I think, because we had such good success with that. Probably even shorten the time frame, shorten the amount of work that they have to do to maybe instead of 10, maybe 5 predictions or 50 trials instead of 100 trials. The other thing that I would do is probably automatically strip out the highest scores, because I think that effect seems robust. I don't think it's curve fitted, so I think we could definitely do that. Uh, I'm not sure what else I would do aside from we would need some better way of recruiting participants. And we experimented using social networks and going direct, like we, didn't have very good luck in Nigeria, going direct without going through a platform, because the platforms take quite a big chunk of what you're paying. It more than doubles what you're paying them. So, and that ends up being pretty expensive. So I would maybe spend some time trying to find a better way to recruit interested participants, and making sure that you can making sure you've got some method of making sure that people aren't cheating. That's the other thing. Fraud detection would be really important. Um, those are the things that I would do off right at the top of my head. Yeah.
Do you think if you were just recruiting people who were interested in learning and exploring their own abilities and not paying them? Because if you weren't paying them, you'd eliminate the people that were cheating.
Yeah. Yeah, and the issue there is numbers. It's quite easy to find 500 participants, if you're paying them $5 and they live in the Philippines or something like that. It's easy to do through a work platform. Um, but using social media to find people that are interested in, even playing it as a game or something like that, it's a lot harder, and you need a lot of people. So maybe it's possible. You need to experiment with that, but it's very, very possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I know Ions with their Got Sci program, they had in the end millions of, well, I don't know if it was millions of participants, it was millions of trials completed at least.
Right.
They weren't paying people. But I could see where maybe some people were trying harder initially, but then stayed in the project because they were getting paid. Whereas in most other projects, you just have people dropping out, who were
Right.
genuinely trying to really do remote viewing. Can you just explain a little bit more? I know you talked about this before, but I didn't quite understand where you say if you stripped out the highest scores. Can you explain that just a little more?
Okay, so if we were to let me break it down to an individual trial, I think that would be the best way to do it. So if we had a trial where there was an ice cream cone and a hamburger, and the participant named the ice cream cone in their transcript, they would get a very high score from the LLM. It would probably equate to a Z-score once we did our 100 random target analysis. It would probably convert to a Z-score of about 2.75, which is the highest, 2.75. If we took that trial and just discarded it, we just ignored it. We took it right out of the analysis. So we did not consider that trial. So every day, what we do is we take the scores for all of the trials for that day, and we do a big Stouffer Z on them, and we go with the direction, whichever one's higher, up or down, or yes or no, right? So this trial would be out of that. It would be gone completely. So we don't use it at all. And when we do that, we get an increase in hit rate and an increase in Z-score, and everything works better when we remove those trials. It's opposite of what you think. You would think that if we paid more attention to those trials, if we removed the worst performing trials, like ones that got bad scores, that we get a better overall result, but we don't. We need those in there. They actually count. Lots of them add up and they count. So if we remove the worst scores, the lowest scores, that makes the whole thing worse. So we need those. If we remove the highest scores, it gets better.
And why is that? Why do you think that happened?
I don't know. I don't know. You could say, if you said overconfidence, because becoming overconfident could backfire on you, right? That would imply that they knew that they were going to actually get a good score, but a lot of times they don't because they never saw that image. They described the ice cream cone, but the actual outcome was a hamburger. So they had no idea that they nailed the target. So it's a mystery to me. I don't really know why.
Do you think there could have been more displacement with those very high scores? And that was the reason?
Well, that is what it is that they're describing the wrong target. That's exactly what that is.
So you're removing the possibility in advance. Like if you were going to do that in advance
Yep.
and move the high scores, you're removing the possibility that those could just be displacement.
Yes, exactly.
Very interesting.
So again, whether or not this is, if we've curve fitted by post hoc looking back at the data and trying, let's pull out these scores, let's pull out these scores, let's take a look. You know what I'm saying? Like that's curve fitting. if this is curve fitted, it won't work going forward into the future. But it doesn't seem like it's curve fitted because it's only the very, very, very top performing trials. It's not like we've removed some subset in the middle somewhere. That would probably be curve fitting. This doesn't seem to be because the difference is quite remarkable, and it's not intuitive because it's the opposite of what you'd think, but it's definitely weird that way. I mean, so I think it's legitimately there. But also, it's kind of interesting. We also did measure in the beginning, we measured what we called displacement was when a participant described one of the other pictures in their 10 trial set that they were doing that day. That happened a lot. A lot. So that was definitely also going on. We stopped measuring that because it was just so much load for the LLM to go through and not only compare their transcript to 100 controls, but also to compare their transcript to all of the other 20 targets in that 10 set. It was just way too much. But we did definitely measure that there was very, very statistically significant high scores coming from matches in other trials that they weren't really supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think that's pretty typical when you have viewers doing trials back to back and
Yeah.
you're not getting their feedback in between or
Yeah.
having breaks.
So I would actually add that to the list of something that I might change going forward is I would want to take a closer look at if we could use that displacement. If we had the computing power to do it, it might be worthwhile to actually take a look and see and use it as part of the overall score, confidence score. So if they're displacing, if you can compare their transcript to all of the other targets in that set and say there's more, pointing toward up or down and adding to the score, you could increase your confidence, I think. I think it would work. But like I said, there was too much for us at the time to do.
So Justin had a question in the chat, and then we'll go to Teresa. Justin asked, have you compared the daily study predictions to any other market sentiment indicators that are available to see if they are correlated, such as NASDAQ 100 pre-market indicator?
No, that's a good question. So what we did do, and I need to do this again with all the data, but partway through, what we did find is we did find that there was a correlation between the magnitude of the event outcome and our ability to correctly predict it. So, in other words, high z-score, high scoring predictions, that's considering all 2,000 trials. If the confidence level was very high and we were right, chances were that the market made a significant move that day, not a small move. So that was kind of interesting, and I think there's been some other papers recently, one in Germany, and if you want, I can look it up for you and send it to you after. They found the same thing, that if a market was going to move either direction in a big way, then it was easier to predict. Essentially, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's been other anecdotal examples of where they found that as well. Teresa, I think you can possibly speak to that.
Well, that's something that we are looking at, yeah, about the volume indicators, whether volume has a bearing on this. So that's something that Paul is looking into.
It's kind of like with a sporting event, like if there's a wide gap between two teams or yeah, like it's a much higher, one team scores a lot higher than the other compared to if their scores are really close. it does seem like those trials tend to be more successful predictions than when they're really close or minor fluctuations.
Exactly. It kind of almost alludes to probabilistic futures versus preset, because an event outcome with a high magnitude seems like it would be more probabilistic, right? And if you're more likely to predict a high magnitude event, and that means that your predictions are two probabilistic events. So it's kind of, I'm not sure about that, but it's kind of interesting.
Teresa, do you have a question?
Right. Well, I was wanting to know if you would like to talk about, you had done some comparison or some analysis regarding sidereal time and also lunar phases. What were your findings on those?
Yeah, there was nothing significant, far from it, but it was interesting in that we found a peak right around the same period. Here it is. Yeah, it's not. It's there's nothing really significant in here, and I've showed this to James, and he doesn't think there's anything significant here at all. We do have in James's study, we had a peak at 1330 local sidereal time. We also have a peak at that time in our data, but the peak is not significant. And there are other peaks that are one peak that's higher that does not shown in his or not replicated in his experiment. So I'm not really sure you can believe very much from this at all. This is a little more interesting, but it's still not significant. But we find a peak in effect size at exactly 12 o'clock true solar time. True solar time is exactly when the sun, wherever you are, is at its highest point in the sky for that day. And that's a astronomy calculation that we do. And so that's kind of interesting. We find the peak right exactly at that time. Again, it's not the effect size isn't significant. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is we find also the peak effect size during the full moon is almost exactly on the full moon, which is kind of interesting. But again, it's not significant.
Wow, that is interesting.
And
So yeah, go ahead, Teresa.
just to clarify, I mean, you probably have the most trials of any experiment that's been done, as far as I know. So, can you say that it's not significant? It's just that mathematically, it just didn't raise to that level. Is that what it?
No, when I say not significant, I mean that the correlation between the peak effect size that we're measuring and the full moon, that correlation isn't significant. It's there, but it's not the average the effect size is not significant. It's not big enough. Same thing with the true solar time. As far as the overall experiment, we have a z-score of 2, which is marginally significant. Yeah, 2.0.
Are you planning on publishing this in a journal?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. It would be a lot of work because this is sort of just very preliminary. But yeah, I might do that.
I'm
Yeah,
sure you,
I'll get John to help me again.
yeah, I'm sure you can find lots of people to help, or I can find people to help you
Thank
too.
you.
That would be terrific because it really has been helpful that your other study was published in a journal. It makes, I
Yeah.
think that was the JSC that it was published in. Is that right? And it,
No,
no?
no is the Journal of Parapsychology.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it makes a difference for other researchers to be able to reference your work if it is published. Jeffrey.
Oh, I just want to mention with regard to publishing, there's been a lot of discussion in the parapsychology community now about the importance of pre-registering your experiment that uh, there, which can be done through the Kessler unit in Edinburgh, so that they know in advance exactly what hypotheses you're testing and what statistical tests you're going to do, and to separate the exploratory findings from findings that are confirming previous studies and so on.
Yeah,
It's become essential these days.
I
If
agree.
you Mhm.
I agree with that, and it also helps with the file drawer issue as well, right?
Yeah.
If you've pre-announced that you're going to do the experiment, they're going to be looking for your results. And if you've had bad results and you don't plan on publishing, well, that's file drawer effect, and that's a big problem.
I did want to ask, I noticed on your website that you have another project that you're looking at possibly doing, or an app that people can sign up if they're interested in. I think it may be like target selection and stuff like that. What is that all about?
Yeah, we thought we could use components of what we've already written for the app that we wrote for the experiment for our participants to use. We could use components of that and we could build it out to be more of a multi-purpose ARV, general kind of ARV management app for people. I might do it, take that next step and develop that whole thing if there was enough interest in it. I know that there's a couple of other applications available now that do something similar, so it may not be worth it, but to take advantage of our LLM, that might be worth it. And the way that we do our 100 target controls and assign a z-score to your trial, I think that actually is kind of valuable. So I just want to see if there's enough interest, and if there is, I would go ahead and do it. If not, then I won't bother with the effort. Yeah.
And so, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you? Some are asking that if they would like to get in touch.
Yeah, if they go to the we have a sort of a demo app set up at arvapp.time-machine.com. I've got it up I'm sharing it right now. And this is sort of a demo. It shows what the LLM can do. You can type a question in here, a coin flip or whatever, and then you generate targets. So it goes to our database and grabs two random images, just like our application did for the experiment. It will go and randomly associate, the two different outcomes to the two different targets. You can describe it. I'm going to use ice cream cone, and you can do an analysis, and it's actually going in, comparing this transcript to each of those two pictures. Plus, it's also going and grabbing 100 random control pictures, comparing it to all of those, and it's coming up with a z-score. So the prediction is yes, and the z-score is 1, which isn't bad. And then so we can enter our final outcome here. What's our final outcome? Yes or no? Well, which one, Deborah? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Boom! You got it right. So there's our ice cream cone with a score of 1. So you can go to this page and you can contact me through here. My email's on there. So that's the best way to contact me.
Okay, great. Anyone have any final questions or comments before we wrap up? Did someone? I thought I heard something in the
Oh,
background.
I'm blowing my nose. I'm sorry. I thought I had my audio off.
Jeffrey's nose wanted to make a comment here. All right. Well, thank you so much, Greg. This has been really fascinating, and I don't think I've ever heard of like going to like Upwork and finding people to hire to do remote viewing. That's so fascinating that you did that, and so wonderful that you introduced this to so many new people around the world. That's really amazing. And so we really appreciate your time here. And I just wanted to mention that for anyone that is interested in running projects on your own, hope this was a very, very complex project, probably about as complex as you can get. And there are definitely ways to go the other end where you can do very simple projects with just a few viewers and you don't need a whole lot of technology, although you can definitely make use of some simple AI projects. So whether you have an interest in doing something more complex or simple, if you're interested in getting started and running your own projects, whether informal or more designed to be formal research projects, either one, we're going to have a meeting on Sunday during the IRVA Research Unit monthly meeting. We meet once a month on the first Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific, which is 5 p.m. East Coast time, and anybody is welcome to attend. So if you're thinking of starting a project or you're somewhere in the middle of designing one, but you need some input, or you'd like to get involved in someone else's project, then feel free to join us this coming Sunday, where we'll just have a person talk about what they'd like to do, and then everyone will give them ideas. And so, or if you maybe aren't interested in associative remote viewing per se, but you would just like to do some other kind of remote viewing project, do consider joining us on Sunday. And then just continue to check out the IRVA website, irva.org, for all our different activities, classes, events. I think there's going to be an online conference as well coming up in March, and then the in-person conference in next November, or no, next October. So, okay, unless anyone else has anything else, we'll say goodbye for now. Thank you so much, Greg. And thank you to everyone who attended today, and Teresa and the app team for helping to get the word out about this.
Thank you, everybody. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And we'll make this recording available on YouTube, on IRVA's YouTube page for anyone who would like to see it. We should have that up in a week or so. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.